Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have announced a 72-hour ceasefire just ahead of Eid al-Fitr. One of the two warring factions has now declared the 72-hour truce after nearly a week of fierce fighting. The RSF, while calling this truce, said the truce coincides with the blessed Eid al-Fitr to open humanitarian corridors to evacuate citizens and give them the opportunity to greet their families. Whether the fight will actually bring this fight to a halt is yet to be seen, but the rival Sudan armed forces are yet to comment on this ceasefire. Whether both parties have agreed on this ceasefire is yet to be ascertained. Now remember, world leaders and other international organizations have been urging the RSF and SAF to strike a deal since the clashes began. But several ceasefire attempts have turned unsuccessful, with both the sides trading blame game for violating these terms. Now remember, the plea for a ceasefire had become urgent since the fighting had left more than 330 people dead by now and forced thousands of refugees to flee the nation.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأصلي وأسلم على سيدنا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين.
Honored citizens, our country is witnessing this year the blessed Eid al-Fitr holiday as our country has been affected by a deep wound which has taken victims, injured many, displaced families, destroyed institutions and homes. The ruin and destruction and the sound of gunfire have not allowed a space for the joy that our people across our beloved country deserve, and we are deeply saddened by this. However, there remains hope that we are with our great people and will overcome this tribulation and emerge from it unified, strength, coherence, and our slogan will only get stronger. One army, one people. We are confident that we will overcome this tribulation with the wisdom and strength that will protect the safety of the country and will allow us a safe transition to civilian rule. Honorable citizens, we mourn all the victims of my country and pray for the recovery of those injured and pray to God that this occasion of Eid returns in safety and peace. I salute you, my soldiers, as you give your lives for the dear country. Long live Sudan, free and independent.
Now, what's interesting is that a fresh new angle has emerged out of this conflict. There are reports indicating that Russia's mercenary group, which is known as the Wagner Group, is involved with Sudan's rapid support forces and is also backing them. What is defining this relationship? We'll try and find out in just a bit. But in a recent evidence that is showing that the Russian mercenary group has been supplying Sudan's rapid support forces with missiles to aid their fight against the country's army is this image that you can see. These are satellite images which have been shared. The surface-to-air missiles have significantly buttressed the RSF paramilitary fighters and their leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo as he battles for power with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Now, in bordering Libya, where a Wagner-backed rogue General Khalifa Haftar controls the land, evidence shows there has been an unusual uptick in the activity as far as Wagner bases in various parts of Africa are concerned. And Sudan happens to be one of these bases of the Wagner group, and that is something which is very apparent from these images. Remember, the Wagner group has played a vital role in Moscow's foreign military campaigns, namely in Ukraine, and has time and again been accused of committing atrocities. In Africa, it has helped to prop up Moscow's growing influence and seizing of resources. Now, Dagalo and Burhan's struggle for power broke into the worst violence this country has seen in decades, especially ever since the violence that took place in Darfur. The fighting has claimed hundreds of lives and deprived millions of people of electricity, water and food. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of what the role of the Wagner Group is in Africa. And for that, let me introduce my guest. I'm joined in by Ruslan Bortnik, who's a political analyst and joining me live from Ukraine. Thank you so much, Ruslan, for joining in. Now, will the Wagner Group's involvement with the RSF change the dimensions of this conflict? And does that indicate that Sudan is now going to be staring at a protracted war, just like one that we are seeing in Ukraine?
Russia has lost her influence in Europe, and now Russia is trying to compensate it in Africa, in Middle East, and other regions. And as we see, Russia is trying to share her influence in many different countries in that regions, and Sudan should be one of that countries. And Wagner Group and other Russians private military companies are ready and preparing to take participation in a military, in a war conflict all around the world. Russia is trying to make Africa and the Middle East the regions of her presence and her influence, like China is trying to make influence on Europe nowadays.
Right. It's interesting, Ruslan, that you've drawn that analogy between Russia and China, like the way China has also been trying to make inroads in other parts of the world. But what is Wagner's role in Africa, especially when we look at in the Russian context?
Because of the sense of this Wagner group. Wagner is ready to work with anybody in Africa. And as we see, not less than 4 countries in Africa now is under the control or with the presence of Wagner Group. Mali, Central African Republic, and other countries. Wagner is ready to work with anybody. Wagner is ready to work with formal or informal forces, legal or illegal forces in that country. Wagner is ready to take salary not only by money but also by resources. And Wagner has a great support from the military of defense of Russian Federation by the weapon, by the supplies, and so it makes this possible for Wagner Group to do a hard and heavy military operation in.
Ruslan, does Wagner's presence indicate that Russia is growing in its influence in Africa? And also, does it indicate a seizure of resources, not just in Sudan, but other parts of Africa too?
Yes, Russia is trying to obtain the control over the resources in Africa because Russia understands that these resources is very important for her enemy, for Europe, for United States. And Russia trying to use Africa for blackmailing the Europe and United States for making them trouble for their economy, so on. Russia is ready to pay for these resources, not only the financial price, but also the political price.
Right. And several political experts have in fact said that Russia and China are only making inroads into those areas which are facing the brunt of the void that's been created by the United States. Can the international community do anything to push Russian presence out of the region?
Of course, but it's very difficult to talk about the international community because we understand that Africa, for example, is a place of competing of few big powers. European Union, especially France, China, Russia, United States, and this is a great competition without the real presence of the political side. International organizations like UN and another organization are very important in food supply and so on in the region. But in political, from the political side, these international organizations are extremely weak in this region. And I think it's one of the goals of international community, general international community, to fulfill the international organization by resources to increase the international regulation and presence in that regions, such in Africa, because in other way, such regions should become a victim of this international competition for resources and political influence.
All right. Many thanks to you, Ruslan, for joining in and sharing your precious views with us. Here's hoping that the conflict, in fact, finds some closure as far as Sudan is concerned.